pregnant widow left to die in snow, saved by a lonely outlaw who found a reason to love again. The snow fell heavily over the barren landscape of the frozen frontier world. The wind cut like a knife, and the sun barely shone through the gray clouds. Everything seemed quiet, but the stillness carried a deadly threat. In the middle of this endless white, a woman struggled to move. Her clothes were torn, her skin red from the cold, and her breathing came in short, painful gasps. She was alone. She was lost. And she was pregnant. Her name was Alara. She had once lived in a small mining settlement tucked into a valley where the mountains rose like jagged teeth. It had been a simple life, hard but safe. She had a husband who cared for her, friends who laughed and worked beside her, and dreams for the child growing inside her. But now, everything was gone. The settlement had collapsed after a mining explosion. The structures were destroyed and bodies lay under the snow. She had searched for survivors, but there were none. Her husband had died trying to save others. And now she walked alone through the frozen world, her legs weak, her heart heavier than the snow that weighed down her arms. She stumbled over a rock hidden beneath the snow and fell forward. Her hands scraped against the icy ground, sending sharp pain up her arms. She tried to pull herself up, but the cold sapped her strength quickly. Her vision blurred, and she sank to her knees, shivering violently. She whispered to herself, words barely audible over the wind, "Please, not yet. I can't die, not with the baby inside me." Somewhere far away, a figure moved through the canyons. A lone rider on a hovering mechanical horse glided over the snow. His coat flapped in the wind, his boots heavy on the stirrups. His name was Cade. He was an outlaw, known for his skills with weapons and his ability to disappear into the wilderness. People said he was dangerous, but he had long stopped caring about what others thought. He had no home, no family, and no reason to stay anywhere. The galaxy had left him alone, and he preferred it that way. But today, Cade noticed a faint signal in the storm. A small flare, barely visible against the gray sky, flickered like a dying star. He narrowed his eyes, scanning the landscape. Normally, he would ignore it. Strangers in the snow were often trouble, traps, or lies, but something about the signal made him stop. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the memory of someone he had lost long ago. Or maybe it was a feeling he had forgotten, the need to help someone. He guided his hoverhorse through the deep snow, following the flare. Hours passed, and the storm grew worse, snow whipping around him, stinging his face. His eyes were sharp, and his instincts guided him. Then he saw her, a figure on the ground, barely moving, her clothes soaked and covered in snow. She was a woman, a pregnant woman. She looked like she might not last the night. Cade leapt from his mount and ran to her side. He knelt down and carefully lifted her head into his lap. Her lips were blue, and she shivered uncontrollably. He wrapped his coat around her, pulling it tightly to keep the wind away. He whispered to her, "Hold on, you're going to be fine. I won't let anything happen to you." Alara's eyes opened slowly. They were wide with fear and confusion. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice weak and trembling. "I'm someone who can help," Cade replied. He looked at her stomach and felt a pang of responsibility. "You have to stay awake. You have to survive." "For your child?" She tried to speak, but a coughing fit shook her body. Cade supported her, giving her a sip of water he had in a small canteen. He used what little supplies he had to clean her wounds and warm her hands. The cold was brutal, and he knew they could not stay in the open. "I need shelter," he said finally. "We need to move before the storm gets worse." Alara tried to nod, but her body was too weak. Cade lifted her carefully, securing her against his chest. The weight of her in his arms was more than he expected, but he did not falter. He had carried heavy loads before, but never a life so fragile. Step by step, he guided them through the snow, using his knowledge of the land to find natural cover. They reached a narrow canyon where the rock walls provided some protection from the wind. Cade quickly assembled a small shelter from parts of his pack and debris. It was not much, but it would keep them alive for the night. Inside the shelter, Alara curled up on a blanket. Her teeth chattered and her body shook from the cold and exhaustion. Cade knelt beside her, wrapping another blanket around her shoulders. He could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty, and the pain. "You're safe now," he said softly. "No one can hurt you here." For a long time, neither spoke. The wind howled outside, rattling the makeshift walls. Cade kept watch, scanning the shadows, his hand never far from the small blaster at his side. He had faced danger before, but protecting someone who could not fight for herself was different. It made him feel vulnerable, yet alive in a way he had not felt in years. Finally, Alara spoke. I thought I would die, she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. I thought no one would find me. You're not dying, Cade said firmly. I won't let that happen. Tears welled up in her eyes. She had spent days alone, cold and starving, with only the fear for her child to keep her moving. Now someone was here, someone who cared. The warmth of hope stirred in her heart, faint but real. Cade noticed the faint blue light of a distant settlement on the horizon, almost invisible through the storm. It was abandoned, a relic of better days. It might have supplies, food, or tools to help them survive. But it was dangerous. Bandits, rogue machines, and unstable structures could kill them both. Yet staying in the canyon was no better. They had to risk it. We will go there, Cade said, more to himself than to her. It's the only chance we have. Alara nodded weakly. She trusted him, though she barely knew him. There was something about his calm strength, his determination, that gave her hope. She had thought all kindness was gone from the world. She was wrong. The storm continued through the night, and Cade kept watch. He thought about the life he had led, running from everyone and everything, leaving pain behind. He had no home, no family, and no reason to care about anyone. But now he held a life in his hands, a life that depended on him. And in that responsibility, he felt something stir inside him, something long buried, hope and perhaps even the possibility of love. As dawn approached, the storm began to ease. The first pale light of morning touched the canyon walls, revealing the harsh beauty of the frozen world. Cade helped Alara to her feet, supporting her as they prepared to leave the shelter. She was weak, but her spirit was stronger than the snow and ice that tried to crush it. Together they stepped into the open world, the wind still sharp and biting. Cade guided them carefully, moving toward the distant settlement, his eyes scanning for danger. Every step was a test of endurance, but every step brought them closer to survival. Alara looked at Cade, really looked at him for the first time. He was rugged and worn, his face scarred by battles and hard living. But there was a softness in his eyes, a gentleness that belied his dangerous reputation. She realized she was not alone anymore. She had someone to fight for her, someone who would not leave her to die in the snow. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, and they both knew it. But for the first time since the collapse of her settlement, Alara felt hope. And Cade, who had lived his life in shadows and solitude, felt something he had not felt in years: purpose. The snow stretched endlessly before them, a white wasteland under a gray sky. Yet in that vast emptiness, two lives now clung together, united by chance and necessity. One life carried the promise of a new beginning, the other carried the strength to protect it. And together, they would face whatever the frozen world could throw at them. The wind had eased, but the frozen frontier was still unforgiving. Cade and Alara moved slowly through the white wasteland, their steps careful to avoid hidden ice patches and jagged rocks. Each breath formed clouds in the cold air, and the snow crunched under their boots. Cade kept a watchful eye on the horizon, scanning for any sign of danger: bandits, predators, or rogue drones left from old wars. The world here was beautiful in a harsh, quiet way, but it could also be deadly. Alara leaned on Cade, her body still weak from the cold and lack of food. Each step was a struggle, and she often had to pause to catch her breath. Cade adjusted the coat around her, pulling it tighter and keeping her close. "We'll rest soon," he promised. "Just a little further," she nodded, her face pale but determined. I can't give up," she said softly. "Not now, not with the baby inside me." Cade glanced at her and felt a sharp pang in his chest. He had spent years avoiding attachments, avoiding responsibility, believing that caring for anyone would only lead to pain. Yet here he was, carrying someone else's life in his hands and feeling something he had not felt in years: hope. "You won't give up," he said. "And I won't let you." The distant silhouette of an abandoned settlement appeared through the snow. Broken buildings leaned against one another, metal and wood twisted from neglect. Cade led Alara toward it, careful to avoid the weaker structures that might collapse under their weight. He had been to many such places before, scavenging for supplies and hiding from the law, but this one seemed quieter than most. As they entered, the air was still and cold, carrying the faint smell of rust and old smoke. Cade scanned the area, checking corners and alleyways. Alara followed closely, her eyes wide as she looked at the remnants of a life that once was. Broken furniture, shattered glass, and discarded tools lay scattered around. It was eerie and sad, but it also offered potential. Supplies, warmth, and shelter could be found here if they were careful. They found a small building that seemed more intact than the others. Cade pried open the door and stepped inside, helping Alara over the threshold. The interior was dark, dust-filled, but safe from the biting wind outside. Cade set her down on a wooden bench, using a blanket from his pack to wrap her. "Rest here," he said. "I'll check for food and supplies." Alara watched him move, his actions quick and precise. There was a quiet confidence in his movements, a skill born from years of survival in harsh worlds. She realized that, despite his dangerous reputation, Cade was careful and thoughtful, a man who weighed every step before acting. For the first time since the accident, she felt a sense of safety. Cade found a small storeroom behind the main room. Cans of preserved food, a few containers of water, and some medical supplies remained. It was not much, but it was enough to keep them alive for a few days. He brought the supplies back, setting them before Alara. "Eat," he said gently. "You need strength." Alara unwrapped a small can of food, her hands shaking. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. Cade watched her, noting how fragile she looked, yet how determined. She was strong even in weakness, and he admired that. They spent the day organizing the building, barricading weak doors and windows with boards and debris. Cade checked the perimeter, making sure no predators or scavengers could enter unnoticed. Alara rested when she could, occasionally asking questions about Cade, his life, and the dangers they faced. He answered honestly, telling her stories of the worlds he had crossed, the battles he had fought, and the people he had lost. She listened quietly, fascinated by his experiences and moved by his honesty. As evening approached, the temperature dropped further. Cade built a small fire in the corner of the room, using scraps of wood and old fuel he had found. The warmth was comforting, and for a moment they sat in silence, watching the flames dance. The quiet was a rare gift in this harsh world, a moment of peace that neither had expected. Alara broke the silence. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. Cade looked at her, considering the question. He had asked himself the same thing countless times before. He had avoided people for so long because attachments brought pain, but something about her had changed that. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe I've been alone too long. Maybe someone needed me and I couldn't ignore it." She nodded slowly, understanding more than his words could explain. There was truth in his eyes, a sincerity that made her trust him even more. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you." The night grew darker, the wind howling outside like a living thing. Cade kept watch, sitting near the door, listening for any sign of movement. The settlement was quiet, but danger could appear at any moment. Bandits often scouted these abandoned places, and rogue machines left from old conflicts still roamed the area. Cade's hand rested on his blaster, ready for action, but he also felt a growing sense of responsibility. He was not alone anymore. He had someone to protect. Alara lay on the bench, the blanket wrapped tightly around her. Her breathing had slowed, and sleep began to claim her. Cade watched her, noting the way she shifted slightly, as if feeling the life growing inside her. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had never cared for anyone like this before, never felt this sense of duty, and yet it felt right. Morning came with a pale light filtering through the cracks in the building. Cade woke early, checking the perimeter and gathering more supplies. Alara stirred, stretching her arms and yawning softly. She looked at Cade and smiled faintly, a small gesture of trust and gratitude. "We need to move," Cade said, his tone serious but gentle. "We can't stay here forever. There might be more danger ahead, and you need better shelter and food." Alara nodded, gathering her strength. "Where will we go?" she asked. Cade pointed toward the horizon, where a ridge of mountains rose, partially covered in mist. "There's an old mining station up there," he explained. "It's abandoned, but it might have what we need. Supplies, warmth, maybe even a safe place to stay for a while." The journey to the station would be difficult. The terrain was uneven, covered in ice and snow, and the winds could pick up without warning. Cade helped Alara to her feet, supporting her as they stepped back into the cold. Each step was a test of endurance, but both moved forward, driven by necessity and growing trust in each other. Along the way, Cade taught Alara how to watch for signs of danger. Tracks in the snow, unusual sounds, changes in the wind. He explained how to use the terrain to their advantage, where to find small shelters in case of sudden storms, and how to ration food and water. Alara absorbed his lessons quickly, learning from the outlaw who had become her guide and protector. One afternoon, as they navigated a narrow pass between two cliffs, they heard the faint sound of movement. Cade froze, listening carefully. Shadows shifted in the distance, figures moving against the snow. Bandits. He motioned for Alara to hide behind a rock, keeping low and silent. The bandits were few but armed and dangerous. Cade observed them, noting their weapons and patterns. He waited until they passed, then guided Alara along a safer route. "We have to be careful," he said quietly. "Not everyone is as fortunate as we are to survive out here." Alara nodded, her grip on his arm tightening slightly. Fear was present, but so was determination. She was learning that survival meant caution, strategy, and reliance on others. And for the first time, she felt that she was not alone in the struggle. By evening, they reached a small cave that offered temporary shelter. Cade gathered what little firewood he could find, and they sat close together, warming their hands. The bond between them was growing, quiet but strong, formed through shared hardship and mutual dependence. As night fell, Alara looked up at Cade. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You've saved me and my child." Cade shook his head, his expression unreadable but softening slightly. "No need to thank me," he said. "We just look out for each other, that's what matters now." She smiled faintly, feeling safe for the first time since the accident. The snowstorm outside raged quietly, but inside their small shelter there was warmth, trust, and a fragile hope. They were strangers yesterday, yet now in this frozen world they were companions, linked by survival and the possibility of something more. As they settled for the night, Cade kept watch while Alara slept. He felt a deep sense of purpose he had not known for years. Protecting her was more than duty. It was a choice to care, to fight for someone else's life as fiercely as he fought for his own. And in that choice, Cade discovered something unexpected. A reason to hope, to believe that even in the coldest and harshest worlds, life could be worth living. The snow stretched endlessly beyond their small cave, a world of danger and beauty, but for the first time they faced it together. And together they would survive. Cade and Alara climbed steadily through the icy slopes, the abandoned mining station growing larger on the horizon. Its metal walls glinted faintly in the pale sunlight, rusted and bent by years of neglect. The building looked abandoned, but Cade knew better than to trust appearances. Places like this often had surprises, bandits, rogue machines, or unstable structures that could collapse without warning. Alara's legs ached and her breath came in short bursts. Cade noticed her struggle and adjusted the pack she carried. "Take it slow," he said gently. "We'll get there, you just need to keep moving." She nodded, gripping his arm tightly for support. "I'm ready," she said, though every word was an effort. "I have to keep going, I have no choice." They approached the mining station carefully, stepping over broken equipment and scattered debris. Cade scanned the area with sharp eyes, noting footprints in the snow and signs of recent activity. The tracks were fresh. Bandits had been here recently. Cade crouched low behind a large metal beam, motioning for Alara to do the same. "We're not alone," he said quietly. "Stay behind me and don't make a sound." Through a gap in the wall, he could see two figures moving among the ruins. They carried rifles and wore patched armor, faces hidden beneath scarves and goggles. Bandits certainly, scavenging and defending their territory. Cade's mind raced. He could fight them, but not while carrying Alara safely. They needed a plan. He pointed to a side entrance, half blocked by rubble. "We sneak through there," he whispered. "If we stay low and move slowly, we can reach the interior without being seen." Alara nodded, fear flickering in her eyes but determination stronger. She trusted Cade completely now. Step by careful step, they moved along the side wall, pressing themselves against the rusted metal. Cade's heart pounded as he calculated each move, knowing that one misstep could mean death. They reached the entrance. Cade used a small crowbar to pry open a metal panel, careful not to make noise. The opening was narrow, but enough to slip through. Once inside, the temperature shifted. Less wind, less cold, but the air was heavy with dust and old smoke. Cade helped Alara through, then quickly closed the panel behind them. The interior of the station was dark and quiet. Broken machinery, rusted rails, and scattered tools littered the floor. Cade led them through the corridors, sticking to shadows and avoiding weak floors that might collapse under their weight. The station had once been a busy hub, but now it was almost silent, echoing only with the faint hum of old power systems still flickering to life. They found a small room that could serve as temporary shelter. Cade barricaded the door with heavy metal crates and old machinery. Alara sank to the ground, exhausted, her body trembling. Cade knelt beside her, handing her a canteen of water and a small ration of food. "You need strength for what comes next," he said firmly. "We can rest, but soon we'll need to move deeper into the station to find real supplies." Alara ate slowly, sipping water, her eyes following Cade as he inspected the room. He was alert, every sense tuned to danger. She watched him, noticing the way his hands moved quickly over surfaces, checking for traps, weak points, or hidden threats. He was careful, precise, a survivor through and through. After a short rest, Cade led Alara deeper into the station. They found signs that the bandits had been through before: broken doors, empty shelves, and discarded food cans. Cade's jaw tightened. He would not let anyone harm Alara, and he would not allow them to steal what they needed. As they moved, Cade explained the layout of the station. "These halls used to lead to storage rooms and living quarters," he said quietly. "We'll split up briefly, don't wander too far. We only have a little time before they might come back." Alara nodded, fear mixed with resolve. She had grown stronger since the storm, her trust in Cade giving her courage she didn't know she had. Together, they navigated the narrow corridors, finding tools, rations, and even some medical supplies. Each discovery was a small victory, and each step deeper into the station made them feel slightly more secure. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. Cade froze, holding up his hand to signal silence. The bandits were returning. He guided Alara into a small maintenance closet, shutting the door quietly behind them. From their hiding place, they watched the bandits move through the main corridor, searching for supplies. Cade's mind worked quickly. He needed a distraction, something that would allow them to slip further into the station while the bandits were distracted. He spotted a loose pipe near the far end of the hall. With careful aim, he kicked it, sending it clanging across the floor. The noise echoed, drawing the bandits' attention. As the figures ran toward the sound, Cade and Alara slipped out of the closet and moved toward a stairwell leading deeper underground. The lower levels of the station were colder, darker, and more dangerous. Machinery hummed faintly, and shadows moved like living things. Cade kept Alara close, guiding her past old conveyor belts and broken rail systems. The air smelled of oil and rust, but it was sheltered from the wind above. They found a small storage area filled with preserved food, clean water, and blankets. Cade helped Alara settle in, spreading blankets across the floor. "This is safer," he said. "We can rest here tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to secure the station completely." Alara sank onto the blankets, exhaustion pulling her under. Cade sat beside her, keeping watch. "You've been very brave," he said softly. "I know this isn't easy." She smiled faintly, a small glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I have to be brave," she replied. "For the baby and for us." Cade felt a warmth in his chest he had not felt in years. Protecting Alara and her unborn child gave him a sense of purpose, a reason to fight that went beyond his own survival. He realized that he cared for them both more than he had expected. The night was long, filled with the creaks and groans of the old station. Cade listened carefully, every sense alert. He could hear the wind howling outside, the occasional scuttle of small creatures within the walls, and the distant echoes of bandits searching the area. But inside the storage room there was a fragile peace. Alara slept fitfully, but Cade stayed awake, keeping watch. He thought about the journey ahead. The station could provide shelter, but it was not a permanent home. They would need to fortify it, defend it, and plan their next steps carefully. Yet, for the first time, he felt a sense of hope. They had survived the storm, evaded danger, and found safety together. And in that shared struggle, a bond had formed, one built on trust, care, and quiet understanding. Morning light filtered through a crack in the wall. Cade awoke first, stretching and checking the room. Alara stirred beside him, her face pale but peaceful. "Good morning," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "Morning," she replied. "I feel safer here." "You are safe," Cade assured her, "and we'll make it even safer, I promise." They spent the day exploring the lower levels, finding more supplies and identifying weak points in the station's structure. Cade worked carefully, reinforcing doors and windows, creating barricades where necessary. Alara assisted where she could, her strength returning slowly but steadily. Each task brought them closer together, their cooperation forming a quiet rhythm of trust. As evening fell, Cade and Alara shared a simple meal, warmed by a small fire made from salvaged fuel. They spoke quietly, sharing stories, fears, and hopes. Cade told her about his past, the mistakes he had made, and the people he had lost. Alara listened, offering comfort and understanding without judgment. In turn, she shared memories of her husband and the settlement, the hopes she had once held, and the dreams she still carried for her child. In the quiet of the storage room, amid the cold and decay of the abandoned station, a connection blossomed. It was tentative, fragile, but real. Two lives brought together by chance and hardship had found trust, care, and a spark of hope in one another. The station was not safe forever, Cade knew. Bandits could return, and the dangers of the frontier were ever present. But for now they had shelter, food, and each other. And sometimes that was enough. As night settled over the station, Cade kept watch while Alara slept, her hand resting lightly on her stomach. He felt a protective warmth, a commitment to safeguard not just her, but the life she carried. He had been alone for so long, drifting through the galaxy with no one to care for. Now he had a reason to stay, a reason to fight, and a reason to hope. For the first time in years, Cade allowed himself to believe that the future could be brighter than the past. And for the first time, Alara felt that she might live to see that future, with someone she could trust and rely upon. Together, in the shadows of the abandoned station, they had found a fragile sanctuary. And together, they would face whatever dangers the frontier could throw at them next. The sun rose pale over the horizon, casting soft light on the abandoned mining station. The snow outside glimmered faintly, reflecting the quiet beauty of the frozen world. Cade and Alara had spent days fortifying the station, making it a safe place to stay for now. The lower levels provided warmth and shelter, and the supplies they found were enough to last until they could plan their next move. Alara stretched, feeling stronger than she had in weeks. The food, rest, and safety had helped her body recover. She touched her stomach gently, feeling the small life growing inside her. For the first time since the collapse of her settlement, she allowed herself to hope. She looked at Cade, who was checking the barricades again, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You're always busy," she said softly, a hint of a smile on her lips. Cade looked over his shoulder and smiled faintly. "Someone has to keep us safe," he replied. "I can't let anything happen to you or the baby." Alara nodded, feeling warmth in her chest. "I know," she said. "I feel safer with you here than I have anywhere in a long time." Cade glanced at her, seeing the hope in her eyes. It was a look he had not seen in years, not since he had lost people he cared about. Protecting Alara had given him purpose, but seeing her trust him, seeing her hope, made him realize something deeper. He cared for her not just out of duty, but because she mattered to him. The day passed quietly. Cade worked on reinforcing the upper levels of the station, clearing debris and securing doors. Alara helped where she could, organizing supplies and tidying their temporary home. Their movements were calm, careful, and in sync, as though they had always known how to rely on each other. By late afternoon, the wind picked up again, snow drifting across the landscape. Cade paused, looking out through a broken window. The storm was approaching, and it would be dangerous to travel. They would need to stay put until it passed. "This storm could last a while," Cade said. "We should stay inside and conserve our strength." Alara agreed. "We can use this time to rest," she said. "And maybe prepare for the future." They spent the next hours quietly, sharing stories and memories. Alara spoke of her husband, the people she had lost, and the dreams she had once held. Cade listened carefully, sharing his own stories, not hiding the pain of his past, but also revealing moments of hope and resilience. They laughed quietly at small memories, finding comfort in the simple act of talking. Night fell and the temperature dropped sharply. Cade built a fire in the corner of the storage room, the flickering flames casting shadows across the walls. Alara sat close, warming her hands, feeling safe and cared for. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," Alara admitted softly. "I thought my life would always be fear and cold, but now I feel something different." Cade looked at her, understanding her without needing words. He had felt it too, the bond that had grown between them, the trust, the warmth, and the quiet hope that life could still be good. "Neither did I," he said quietly, "but it's real, and we have to protect it." The next morning, the storm passed, leaving a calm, clear sky. Cade and Alara prepared to move to the upper levels of the station, which offered more space and better vantage points. Cade wanted to make the station their home, at least for a while, until they could find a safer, more permanent place. They worked together, hauling supplies and securing the upper corridors. Each task was a challenge, but their teamwork made it easier. Cade noticed how Alara had grown stronger, how her determination had become a source of inspiration for him. He realized that protecting her was no longer just duty, it was personal. She mattered to him in a way he had never allowed before. By afternoon, the upper levels were organized and safe. Cade set up a small area with blankets and tools, a place where Alara could rest and the baby could be protected. He also repaired a communications device, hoping to send a faint signal to any nearby settlements for help if needed. As they settled in, Alara felt the first sharp movements of the baby inside her. She gasped softly, a mixture of fear and wonder on her face. Cade's eyes widened as he watched her, his hand instinctively reaching for hers. "It's okay," he said gently. "It's a sign of life, a sign of hope." Alara smiled, tears forming in her eyes. "I've waited so long to feel this," she whispered. "I thought I had lost everything, but now I have life and you." Cade squeezed her hand, his heart full. He had spent years running from attachments, believing they only brought pain. But here, in the quiet of the mining station, he understood that life could be worth fighting for, not alone, but with someone he cared for. Days passed, and the bond between them grew stronger. Cade taught Alara how to defend themselves, how to move silently through the station, and how to watch for danger. Alara learned quickly, her courage and determination surprising even Cade. Together they repaired broken systems, fortified doors, and prepared for the challenges that might come their way. One evening, a faint noise echoed through the station. Cade tensed, listening carefully. Alara pressed close to him, her eyes wide. It was a faint rustling, a sound that could mean danger or nothing at all. Cade moved cautiously, checking each corner. He found a small group of scavenger robots wandering aimlessly in search of old materials. They posed no immediate threat, but Cade quickly disabled their power sources to prevent them from causing harm. Alara watched him, impressed by his skill and careful thinking. "You've saved us again," she said softly. Cade shook his head. "We've saved each other," he said. "And we'll keep doing it every day." Weeks passed. Spring approached, and the snow slowly melted, revealing patches of green alien plants and rocky soil. The station was now a safe home, a place where Alara could rest and prepare for the baby. Cade had become more than a protector, he had become family. And Alara, once alone and frightened, had found someone to trust completely. One morning, Alara woke with sharp pains. Cade helped her to the prepared sleeping area, his hands steady and calm despite the fear rising in his chest. "It's okay," he said gently. "We're ready, we can do this." The labor was long and difficult, but Alara was strong. Cade stayed by her side, holding her hand, encouraging her and keeping her calm. She gritted her teeth, breathing through the pain, and he whispered words of comfort. "You're doing this. You're amazing. Keep going." Hours passed. Sweat and tears mixed on their faces, but finally a cry pierced the air, a tiny, strong cry that filled the room with life. Alara held the baby close, tears streaming down her cheeks, a mixture of relief, joy, and love. Cade looked at them both, his chest full, a smile breaking across his face. "We did it," he said softly, awe in his voice. "You're safe, you're both safe." Alara smiled at him, exhaustion and happiness in her eyes. "We did it together," she said. "I couldn't have done it without you." The days that followed were peaceful. Cade and Alara cared for the baby, naming him Lauren, a symbol of new life and hope. Cade built a small cradle from salvaged materials, and Alara decorated it with soft blankets. They laughed quietly, shared small meals, and began to imagine a future beyond survival, a future filled with family, trust, and love. Cade spent his days maintaining the station, hunting for fresh food and preparing for any threats. But each night he returned to Alara and Lauren, holding them close and feeling a warmth he had never known. He had spent years running from life, but now he had something worth staying for, worth protecting. Alara, too, felt the change. Her fear and loneliness had been replaced with trust, hope, and love. She knew the frontier world was still dangerous, but she also knew they could face it together. And with Lauren growing strong each day, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. One evening, as the sun set over the icy mountains, Cade stepped outside with Lauren in his arms. Alara joined him, leaning against his shoulder. They looked out at the horizon, the snow melting into streams, the first signs of life returning to the barren land. "We've survived so much," Alara said quietly, "but I think this is only the beginning." Cade nodded, holding them both close. "Yes," he said, "and whatever comes next, we'll face it together, always together." The wind blew gently through the station, carrying the promise of a new season. In the quiet of the frontier, amidst the harsh landscape and the remnants of an abandoned world, a small family had found safety, hope, and love. Cade, once a lonely outlaw, had discovered purpose and redemption. Ilara, once a widow facing death and despair, had found life and trust. And little Lauren, a new life born in the cold, would grow knowing the warmth of care, courage, and family. The frozen world outside remained dangerous, but inside the mining station, life flourished. Together, they had survived the storm, evaded danger, and discovered the greatest treasure of all: connection, love, and the strength to face whatever the future held.